Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? It's Jeffrey Podford from the Open People Network, or OPN.Ninja. And today we're having part two of one of our probably most favored shows, which is Getting High in Canada. And today we're with three awesome entrepreneurs that are going to be talking to us about where they've come from, how they got here today, and all the cool things that are going on in the world of cannabis and in the world of what's going on in Getting High in Canada. So we're pretty excited to talk to everybody. We're going to jump right into it. Quick little snapshot about myself and what we're doing. OPN's coming up to almost a year now that we've been running our podcast / videocast, running our events, and we're getting pretty excited coming up to this year after everything that we've been doing. I can't remember, probably on show number, let's pick a number, 22. We've done 7 or 8 pitch events. So we're really starting to build up the content. We're pretty excited with all the people that we've been talking to. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into talking to the people on the panel and getting a little bit more insight. So maybe you can give us a little bit about yourselves, what you're up to and what's going on. And one thing that nobody will know anything about you, you got to share it. So Natasha, why don't you start us off and we'll go from there.
Okay, well, hi everyone. I am currently in Vancouver. I've been working in the cannabis and health industry for a number of years. I'm also an entrepreneur, so I own some businesses. So I have a pharmacy, walk-in clinic, health center in Toronto, and I'm in the process of opening a bar here in Vancouver. Most of my work with the cannabis industry started with Lift Cannabis. So I was one of the first people who helped start that organization, which is now probably one of the most credible resources for the legal medical marijuana program in Canada. And I've also done a little bit of work just around the branding on the medical and the rec side of the market. And I guess one thing that you probably don't know about me is I'm in the middle of a photo shoot today. So I'm live from a wax room at the salon that did my hair and makeup.
That's awesome. I like it. Kelly, you're next on the list, so why don't you jump in and give us a little info too?
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly Coulter and I'm here from Victoria, Vancouver Island, paradise I might add. We're celebrating 420 today, of course, and we're very happy to be a part of this show. I'm sorry I don't have video. But I started in the I guess I call it the space. I started in the space probably about 7 years ago. I am a journalist by training, and the cannabis, the prohibition of cannabis became an issue for me at one point. And now that we're coming to the end of prohibition, I am focusing mostly on writing and mostly focusing on what I consider to be a very, very important issue, which is about the sustainable practices that we should incorporate moving forward. I also like to focus on women, and of course I like to promote women, and that's why I think today is very important, and I thank you very much for including us in this conversation.
Awesome. And one thing about you that nobody would know.
Oh my gosh. Let me think. I'm kind of a closed book. Can I get back to you on that?
You can. We'll let you think about it. But one thing, it's got to be something good. And
we've had
some dandies. Trust me, we've had some dandies.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Jeanette, what do you got?
Hi there. I'm Jeanette Vandermeerl. My husband and I co-founded the Green Organic Dutchman, which is one of the licensed producers of cannabis under the ACMPR, on a lovely farm in Ancaster, Ontario. And I'm in Toronto currently because the O Cannabis Conference is starting tomorrow morning. And it's, of course, happy 420 to everyone. We started the company back in 2012 initially, and we're licensed last year. We're growing rapidly. We're growing organic cannabis, which is kind of a new thing. There's not a lot doing organic cannabis. We consider ourselves to be a craft grower. We have small batches, organic products. So on a farm, we're carbon neutral. We grow with LED lights. We recycle our water. We do reforestation. We have solar panels and geothermal heating. We're trying to be as ecologically friendly as we can be, and really proud about our company and its rapid growth. I guess then one of the things you don't know about me. Okay, as a kid, I was, most cute little girls play with dolls. I had a like of bugs and insects and animals. So my imaginary friend, instead of most having a little doll or a little person, mine was a pet snake. I have no idea why. So yeah, that was my thing you don't know about me.
I like it. That's an interesting one. Maybe that's the reason why you like the outdoors and you started a company that does this. I think that's a good reason. I'm going with it.
Thank you.
Very cool. Kelly, how about you? Have you thought through it? You figured out which one is yet?
You know what, I was thinking about previous lives. So I guess one thing that someone or most people don't know about me, but a few people do know, is that I wrote a script about a group of unique seasonal cannabis farmers a number of years ago. And that story, I think, is really relevant today when we talk about pioneers in the industry. And someday I'd like to resurrect that script and tell that story, of how things were 20, 30, even 10 years ago.
Very cool. I think you're right. I think that you probably could find some people that could be their 70s and 80s now that would have their own stories of where they were going with cannabis back in the day. And
Yeah.
they probably had the same aspirations back then as we do now, and how it all kind of ties together, except for now we're getting a bigger foot into being able to do those and see them without being restricted. So I think that's kind of a neat transition. I'm sure there's some people out there too that would be pretty happy that they should start smoking again after 30, 40 years of giving it up because of being hidden or something.
Yeah, I could actually be one of those people because I am not a cannabis consumer, and I'm actually looking forward to learning. I mean, I've obviously been learning about it in the past few years, but now that we're opening up a market into a more transparent space, I think it's really going to benefit women and men of my generation. I'm 53. I was actually at a round table yesterday at my community center, which is mostly seniors, and there was someone there speaking about medical marijuana, and it was mostly women 60 and up that were in the room. Really interesting demographic.
Well, I think that kind of just jumps us right into the first topic that we all kind of wanted to jump in, and I think we've all kind of mentioned a little bit about it. So I guess you have this environment that's now across Canada changing. The whole world is kind of focusing on Canada because we're putting the biggest foot forward ever in, well, we can say it's medical marijuana for now, but as things start to change over the next year, the whole government started to make this shift and change. And there seems to be a place for everybody in this new business economy of marijuana. Where do you guys see women and where they're fitting in? So there's a lot of industry that's being built already, has been built. But where do you guys see the shift in how this demographic is starting to change?
I think
Kelly, maybe. Oh, sorry, Natasha, jump in. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think this is one of the most exciting times in industries for women, because I think this is one of the first times in history that women can enter this legal market at the same time as men. We know in the States, 1 in 3 leadership positions in the cannabis industry are held by women. So I think that's sort of what we want to strive towards. When you look at the boards and executives in a lot of the corporations in our legal cannabis industry, you don't really see that reflected. So I think we need to do a little bit more to push women into those leadership roles, but definitely on the entrepreneur side, there's so much happening with women, and women just do it really well no matter what we're doing. So I think we're going to take the industry by storm.
I like it. I like it. Kelly, what's your thoughts?
Sorry, I was looking up some information that I had sourced yesterday. Is my microphone on right now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, good. So I agree with Natasha 100%, and those stats that they're talking about from the US are encouraging. But I did spend some time recently with Ricardo Baca, and he is a journalist out of Denver who essentially his feedback was that even though, you know, women have made the cover of Newsweek, Women Grow has made a big splash in the United States, that it's not near where it has to be, and I tend to agree with him on this. Women are going to have to be very, very vigilant. We have a lot to overcome here in this industry. I can tell you that I work a lot with men and women, and some of the feedback that I'm getting, especially from the investor side of things, is that, you know, women are not proportionally represented in certain networking opportunities and things of that nature. You know, we have the barriers to entry that is represented in other sectors like the tech sector. Specifically, I can look at the tech sector and say, yeah, you know, there are definite similarities there. So I encourage women to work outside of the cannabis industry to make alliances with other sectors and learn from the women who have done it before us. And I think that that is something that I'm going to be writing about a lot in the future.
Jeanette, how are you feeling about it? What's your thoughts?
Well, you know, there's out of the 33 corporations that are currently licensed producers, I think 9 or 10 of us are women-led or women co-led, so I'm pretty proud of that. Women make, we all know, in most of the world, most of the financial decisions as well as the healthcare decisions primarily. My background is in healthcare, in nursing as a registered nurse. I think that women, especially in medical and when we move to recreational, I don't know if it will eventually go to a leadership role, but I think that women are certainly the grassroots base of the cannabis movement. And I think that because it's a nurturing, holistic healthcare wellness product, I think women are running this industry already.
I like that. It's good. It's a good direction or point of view. I kind of think it's interesting when I guess when it comes down to it, I have this, and I don't know what you would classify it as, but one of the things that I have is that when you have to classify something as being cultural from Asian or when it gets into a demographic versus being male or female, it all bothers me. And I just think that it should be driven by the people that want to take it and go for it. So I don't think that it should be segmented by you're 5 feet tall or 8 feet tall or 6 feet or 2, whatever it is. Anything of those things of nature, I think they're just ridiculous. And I think that all of us put up these walls to try to block people from getting in anywhere because we think we have more control power if we do. And I'm a big pro component of drive. I want people that are doers. I don't care if you're 3 feet tall or you're a female or you're Asian or you're anything. If you're the smartest, you're the best, go get it, and I'm going to support you to help you drive it there. And it's tough when you see all these things from BET and everything that segments everybody. And then we say, well, there's so much in cultural differences. There's so many problems. We create it, and then we fight against ourselves to try to make a point of who we are. And I think that of all my friends and people that I know that are in the marijuana industry and everything else, you know, it's not exactly weighted 50-50. But I think that if you gave the right opportunity to the right female or to the right culture, they would jump at it and jump through the door and be amazing at that at any point in time. So I think if we can always focus on that, I think that there'll be a place for everybody, but I think it's a place for all the good people that are going to make a difference and make a change. So I commend you guys for driving hard and pushing to make sure that there is a female space inside of the side of the marijuana opportunity business, or however you want to classify it. But I think you guys are already there, and I think you're already driving forward. So I'm already excited for that, and I think that that's really how it should be. So besides being nurturers and all that other good stuff that you mentioned, Janet, I agree. But at the end of the day, it's the go-getters that should be at the top and pushing their way through. So, and you guys are doing that, so I commend you for that. So outside of my opinion,
I was going to say, I think if we had more stats in terms of like the grassroots movement, because we don't have a lot of data about who has been involved from the beginning, and there have been women who have been pushing this from the very beginning. So I think, we don't have those statistics, but for sure this isn't really somewhere where we need to push women into this industry. I think it's more about elevating them and lifting them. And that's an issue beyond this industry, like you mentioned, the tech industry and other places. So it's just about elevating women in all industries so that we can be well represented in leadership roles.
Exactly. It's respecting everybody who they are and what they're good at. And I think we tend to always fall to, if it is guys in business or whatever, and I don't think that's right. I think it should be, again, you take Marissa from Yahoo and everybody else that's making a dent and making a change. And I fully support that. You know what? You can do the job. Best person wins. They're the person that should be there, and everybody else can sit back and enjoy the person that's driving and leading. So, and when it comes to this space, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for people to start and jump into it. And I think maybe women have forerunned it because they've seen it coming. And I think that's what makes it more helpful, because a lot of time, maybe too many people sat back and just thought that it was never going to happen. So how do you support that movement? How do you support better leadership and making this product? And I think, Kelly, you mentioned it's making it sustainable beyond just a one and gun, where you're going to have something that happens in the next couple of years and then it's going to fizzle out, and it doesn't grow from there. And that's kind of where I wanted to go next is this a fad, or is this something that is really going to make a big difference and a big change in medical, but also just in livelihood, just like coffee or just like any other alcohol? Like, does this fit in that bucket for you, or does this fit in something that's more and it's going to drive and grow as an industry? And maybe Jeanette, you want to jump on that?
Absolutely. So I think like any consumer recreational product, like coffee or tobacco or alcohol, and using those analogies, but hopefully in a healthier sense, there's certainly been no attributed deaths to cannabis, which there have been to all of the other substances. I think it's a lifestyle choice, and I'm really glad the legislation that came out make this a responsible use adult product. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to change the whole world. I think that as legalization occurs for cannabis, it might become a harm reduction process or product for a lot of things, not just as a recreational product, but also to reduce opiate and benzodiazepine abuse and use. I think it's going to change a lot of things. I think it's a world changer as much as the .com age. I think it'll be a huge thing in 10 years.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, especially when you look at harm reduction approaches with physicians. They don't know how to deal with things like pain, and that's why we have such an opioid issue. But now that we're opening it up for medical marijuana and we're going to give them the data they need so they can understand how to prescribe, I think it's going to make things a lot better for patients and for physicians, just sort of speaking from the health side of things.
Yeah, and of course, I agree, Jeanette, absolutely. I think it's not only going to change the world. I think it's going to be the disruptor of all disruptors. So, one of the things that I'm looking forward to, along with the as a replacement for opioid addictions potentially, and some of the research that's going to be done is, and I am on Vancouver Island, so yeah, I'm wearing my unicorn crown right now, is that it's going to bring us back to our relationship to plants in a more significant way. And I'm really encouraged by the fact that the federal government very bravely included home cultivation. I think that, there was a joke going around last week about how 4 people who would never be able to keep a plant alive are now going to be able to learn how to take care of 4 plants really, really, really well. I think that this is true. People are going to potentially reinvigorate a relationship with plants and their own self-care that we haven't seen in a very long time. And this is exciting.
That's actually an awesome point, even though it's a tough point to fathom, that people are going to become better people because they're going to take care of plants now because they know that the value of that plant's not worth losing. so they're going to become better people for it, which I think it sounds funny, but it is actually very true. So I like that. It's a good point. I'm going to use that one. You're right. I think there's so many elements that keep tying into the benefits and the value of it. Now, where does this fit in general for safety measures? Where does that take somebody? And I guess we always have to go from the good, the bad, and the ugly, but from somebody that obviously has been around and familiar with the product for 30 years. I never really thought anything myself as being, oh my God, I got to watch out for this or that. You just kind of took care of it like you do anything else. But I don't also have kids, so I don't look at that aspect of it. So where do we think that takes place? Does it just become the same setup as an alcohol or as anything else or as driving? Or it becomes kind of different because it's treated as more of a medical or health care type product? Because there are products now that are being created, from liquid juices to cupcakes to you name it. So does this become something that has to be regulated now so that it doesn't affect us worse in 10 years?
I mean, I think it's going to be a learning curve, and it's a little. We can look at the alcohol experience, but it's not the same, especially when you look at the medical benefits and how we've seen so many benefits with children who have epilepsy in terms of using CBD. So I think, but it isn't, the whole public safety issue is a big issue, and we can't be like telling people that you're a better driver when you smoke marijuana and things like that. So I think it's going to take, with any policy change, a lot of public education, and we've seen that with tobacco. Tobacco didn't just sort of minimize in terms of use because of policies, it was also because of public education. So I think we're going to need to follow the same sort of trajectory that we followed with other policy change, and we're going to make mistakes. But as long as people know we're going to make mistakes and we're going to learn from it, that's all we can really do, because it's new territory.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really exciting, I think, for us in the industry are doing this new, called a social experiment. We need to have, I think, regulations, restrictions. The government has put a lot in, and I love your point, Natasha, about there has been a lot of false or unsafe claims, health claims, people claiming they're better drivers or that driving drugged is a safe thing, which it is not. I don't know if it's the same impairment level as alcohol. I don't do either when I drive because I hope to be responsible. But we do need rules around it, and maybe they'll get relaxed in the near future, but initially we need those tight rules and regulations to make sure we do it right. I think in the United States they might have started with some loose rules and are now trying to increase compliance and regulation. I think we're going the other way, and I think it's easier to loosen rules than to tighten them later.
Yeah, I think that the Canadian government looked at what happened in the United States, and they took their advice, and I think the amendments will be made, and what the final legislation looks like could be a little bit different than what was introduced last week, but we're definitely on the right path.
So who becomes the regulator to all of this, or the teacher or the trainer? Are we looking at the Amsterdams of the world and saying, well, they've seen this set the stage for the last 20, 30 years. Are they the ones that we're kind of all learning from? There's been a lot of articles written and details provided around Canada's the leader, and we're the ones showing the world what we need to be, how you need to be if you want to be responsible around marijuana, when I think we're all just sort of learning about it. So it's kind of like, we're going to keep learning. We're going to set some rules. You guys follow us. We got this taken care of. Is that kind of how it's happening, or are we really taking the learning from other countries like the Netherlands and whatnot?
Yeah, you know what? I just very quickly, Natasha, and then I hope that Canada does become the leader with regards to the environmental impacts. And I have to say that I think we're going in that direction. Greenhouses are already a part of the medical marijuana ACMPM, or the Access Medical Marijuana Program, and outdoor was incorporated into the legislation. And I think that on the environmental impacts, Canada could be a leader. And I'll let you guys speak to the other elements.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think especially when we look at our licensed producer program, and just the whole, it's a bit of a rigmarole to become a licensed producer, but we have the most stringent program probably in the world. And I know a lot of other countries are learning from that. I think on the recreational side of things, it's going to be a lot of trial and error and just trying things. I don't know if anyone's done it exactly right. And I think Canada's view is more along public safety than creating a marketplace and making money off of it, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's sort of the way our country is going. So I don't know if we're going to necessarily follow the Colorado model. We're going to do something that's going to be Canadian created and then Canadian tested. So I think that's essentially what I think is going to happen, but I know as well as anyone.
And I agree. I think Canada is doing their own thing. The Netherlands is interesting because cannabis is not actually legal there yet. It is a tolerated substance in general, other than a very small medical program. Canada is absolute leader in this, and I think we're breaking a lot of ground that I think is going to set the benchmark for a lot of the world, and a lot of the world is looking at us and our program. And because we do have a high bar to entry to become a licensed producer, and it is very capital intensive as well as skill intensive, but I think because of that, we are creating a great system that will be the envy of the world, and it doesn't copy anybody else. It's totally a Canadian-made solution.
There was some discussion earlier too about with the legislation around being part of NAFTA and all of the other, I guess, protocols around the countries and trade agreements, that because of the fact that we have, based on medical marijuana, that is what allows us to continue to trade with these countries. But if we remove the medical marijuana statement and we legalize marijuana, that they'll have to go through and change all the treaties that we have with all these other countries, because that was one of the things that was written in the treaty that stated that if because Canada was already testing medical marijuana, that they would allow it through only for those conditions. If it fell outside of that, you would be described as, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's a drug carrying country. I can't remember the terminology for it, but that we would actually fit on the other side, and that would cause more problems. So is that something that legislation and the government is also working on at the same time?
I can take that. So currently, the only import or exportation around cannabis purposes. There's certainly no plan on exporting cannabis for recreational uses at this time. There are a lot of treaties that need to be dealt with, and thankfully Canada has a lot of great lawyers and politicians that are good at that. But currently, the only laws that are permitted, I think, is solely around medical use, documented medical use, or research only.
Okay. So if we decide to, because of the fact that we have so many grow operations that are going on that are government supported, that they wouldn't cross borders, they would stay within the Canadian jurisdiction. But what we could do is we could trade or sell how we actually do all of this to the other countries. So we could go into those countries, train them, and they would do the same thing. So there would never be any reason to do border crossings of, like, I'm just making something up, but say there's different regions like in Africa or somewhere else where they create the legislation to say they can do this, but they don't have the opportunity to grow it. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the greenhouses. They can't put these things together. So does that become a whole new legislation that's get built that it then allows for this shipment to go through? And that's something they tackle over the next 10 years? Or it's never going to happen that way, so we don't ever have to think about it?
So certainly our IP, Canada's the first country to really grow cannabis on scale in a high quality, tested, regulated, restricted market. So we certainly have the IP that we can export and teach other countries how to do it right. But again, there may be opportunities to export cannabis, dried product, and or extracts for medical purposes for countries that do legalize that. There are some countries that are looking at it, don't know the exact rules, but companies like Germany, Uruguay, other countries have done that already.
I'd like to add, I think it is interesting that Canada is already currently exporting medical marijuana, and it does give us a little bit of an advantage in being, and we are leaders. Canada has always been a leader in Canada has always been a leader when it comes to cannabis. But, you know, I've heard people from other countries, especially in South America, talk about, you know, that this is actually a plant that came up from the Southern Hemisphere and from the Middle East. So, you know, those are natural, if you will, geographical spaces for the plants to be grown in. And, you know, plants ideally should be grown in where they're supposed to be grown, and the need for export, you know, it might be a little bit exaggerated, but that may be 10 or 20 years down the road, right?
No, for sure. I guess we got to be a leader, and I think that it sounds like there's a lot of other countries that are leaning on us to kind of set the path. And so I guess based on that, I think the last thing that came out that they were looking at 1 year's time from now, is that still kind of the next placement, or has that changed as well?
I think I think they'll stick to it. I mean, they've managed to stick to all the other timelines they've set out. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
It's going to go like gangbusters. Every business you can dream up is just lining itself up for the candidate.
No, I don't know if that's going to be what's happening. I mean, I think what was presented definitely changed a lot of people's trajectories, especially in terms of brand creation in the gray market, because I think a lot of people were thinking, you know, you create these brands and then they're just going to transition into the legal market, or you've been working in the gray black market and you can just easily transition into the legal market. I don't know if it's going to look like that, but I think we're going to need to wait to see what the provinces do, because that's where a lot of the control and planning and execution is going to come to, especially when you look at distribution points. Like the pharmacy college didn't seem impressed because they weren't mentioned, but I think it's going to be up to each province to determine what happens with distribution.
So how does this, the legislation change, how does this affect your businesses and what you're doing now in this space? Does that move you from a gray area to a green area, or does it kind of keep you just, you know, same trajectory, still moving along as is? Do you see a difference that you'll have to make a change for? Is it re-educating? Is it training? Like, what types of things do you see changing in your environment in the next year?
Well, one of the groups I work with, it's a new organization for females, so it's called L Collective, and we're working with females who are in the gray area to help sort of incubate them so that they can enter the legal space. So for us, we're just waiting to see what's going to happen around the branding side of things. But we know things like software and maybe even around packaging are things that will still be transitioning into the legal market. So what are these businesses that people can start and work on right now that in 1 year's time are going to be needed and relevant? So that's sort of where we're at. I don't know, Jeanette and Kelly, what your thoughts are, because we're all coming from sort of different perspectives here.
As far as I can see, for our company, we're very pleased. The government has been clear that the production side will definitely stay with the federally licensed companies, which we are. As far as the black market, I think that there was not a lot of support or encouragement for those companies that are currently operating in the black market for them to be able to have any ability to move into the legalized space. Natasha, that ancillary products, promotions, packaging, all those things, and hopefully edibles in the future, as have been promised in the new legislation. We don't know when, but there will be some collaboration. But I think it was very clear that the production side, at least, is going to stay strictly with the federally regulated and licensed companies. So for our company, that's great.
Okay, so I'm once again on Vancouver Island, and I have to keep reminding our community here, and not just on the island, but in British Columbia. We're very focused on British Columbia, by the way, right now, because we're facing a provincial election, which is going to make a difference, probably more to do with distribution than anything else. But going back to the licensed producers and what Jeanette is referring to, so in the future, all producers will have to be licensed. And right now, the licensed producers are medical licensed producers. What the licenses might look like for the adult use licensed producers might be not quite the same as a medical licensed producer. We're not sure. That remains to be seen, right? So I'm gently telling people, you know, what the current licensed producers are having to go through to get a production license might not be the case for the future. And the federal government did talk a lot about the craft industry diversity, and this is how it is impacting the island and this province. British Columbia is the largest producer of cannabis historically, and interestingly enough, that also applies to California. And when I was meeting with this writer from the United States last week, he predicted, and this is really interesting, that in the future, California will be the only producer for the rest of will be the primary producer for the rest of the country. And he said because it falls in line with how their food is produced. And I said, do you think that might be the case with British Columbia? And he said, well, it's possible. I'm not sure if that's the case. I think that we have so much to look forward to, and we have to support all of the good policies that are coming up, and encourage the government to create good policy that will benefit as many people and as many communities as possible. And I hope I didn't digress too much on that question.
No, not at all. So you mentioned something that I have never, well, I've heard it a million times, but not under cannabis. And I actually find it interesting, and I kind of like it because it shapes my mind around the whole craft side of things. So the craft brewery now becoming the craft marijuana movement. But is that something that's kind of being moved around a lot in this space? And maybe Jeanette, you have heard more of this based on what your business is. But are people looking at it now from that standpoint and saying, well, I can create my own kind of craft beer, my own craft marijuana. I can get the seeds, I can do this, I pollinate this, and now I'm going to go and I can sell this in a shop, or I can go to all of the head shops in Toronto and Canada and start selling my brand, and I can do the same thing that you're doing with your own craft beer. Is that something that's going to come out of this, its own little movement in the next 2 or 3 years?
Good question, and you did break up a bit there. I missed some of it. But I think that was the expectation, and I think there was a lot of hope that they could enter this market. I think with the current restrictions on products, branding, marketing, product placement, packaging, everything that came with legislation, I think is very supportive. I don't think the average person that's been in the black market or has worked toward that or as a breeder a lot of venues or ways to.
I think we lost. Didn't catch the last part, Jeanette, on what you were saying. It cut out. We might be having a bad connection. But Natasha, did you hear that? And did you get any thoughts around that?
Sorry, I ran out to see where everyone went. So you're going to need to remind me what the question was.
The question was around the craft side of things and how it seemed. It was something that I hadn't really heard too much about, but getting into the craft movement of kind of like the craft beer, where you can show up to any beer store in Canada or any place that would be holding that beer, you can start selling in your craft, your build. Is that the same thing that's now happening with marijuana? So in the next 2 to 3 years, people will be growing their own types and going in and saying, you know, here's my Kush and here's this, and their own version of it. And that's what the people are going to start selling in their head shops across Canada. Yeah,
I find the whole, even just the term craft to be interesting, especially when we use it in the marijuana context. I think, I mean, on one hand, like, we can't completely make it like the alcohol experience, because like I can't actually like make beer like in this wax room and then go and sell it on the street because there's so many regulations around it. I I mean, marijuana is a bit of a different product, but I think if we are going to say craft, a lot of the companies on the legal side are small, like craft, and a lot of the companies on the black market side are massive, like not craft. So I find the whole term to be interesting. I think there needs to be a place for people who don't have millions of dollars to get a license to enter the industry, but I think regardless of that, there needs to be regulation. And I think that's the most important piece of it. Like I should not be able to make beer in this weird sink over here and then sell it. And I think if that's what people are referring to when they're talking about craft, then that's not necessarily where we want to go, but we need to keep the market open. I'm a huge proponent of free market and allowing for everyone to enter a market. And I think we need to lower barriers to entry, but not so much that we're putting people at risk.
And that's for sure. There'll probably be a lot of places that do come at risk. And even when you have alcohol in a craft beer and someone puts on it 5.6% alcohol, is anybody really testing that? So when it comes to the craft marijuana movement, does that mean that this one's got this type of sativa and all of a sudden it's so potent that, 3 puffs and you're knocked on your ass? I have no idea. Like, how do you have that as a measure? Like, it's 6 hot tamales and this one's 3 puffs and your ass is on the floor. Like, is there something that it starts to push in that direction? I have no idea, but I guess I'm just throwing that out there.
And I think that's why we didn't see things like shatter and butter put into the legislation. Those are widely sold in the black market in massive amounts, and I don't know what's going to happen to that industry. But it's not something that was included in the legal side of the industry, because it's certainly something that people can make in their house and then sell. But is that something we want sold like that? Probably not.
No, exactly. But then that also creates a movement for selling through e-commerce online. So now can I start selling myself online because I can sell anything else? I can sell my craft beer. I can do those things. Is that something that's feasible, or does that still stay as black market? And even when the legislation changes, I shouldn't be able to sell my personal goods because I've had enough of this brand and I feel like throwing it up on eBay. Can I do that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's happening right now. I don't know what's going to happen with that. It's like another huge industry.
Right. Can I talk a little bit about the black market?
For sure, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been writing a little bit about price points, and this is something that is really critical with regards to the black market. And part of the mandate for the federal government is to defund organized criminal elements, and some people call that the black market. It's the black market, organized crime constitutes 5% of the black market, according to a published study. I don't know if that is accurate. I think that those numbers are really hard to gauge personally. That's my feeling on that percentage. But in order to defund or remove a criminal element or bad actors, you have to remove the profit incentive. So in order to do that, we have to come up with a realistic production cost to cannabis. And right now, I don't see those numbers being floated at all. And I think that that's what the government really has to study the most. Tax accordingly and proceed with caution. And once again, going back to sustainable practices, the best way to do that is to lower your production overhead, and that takes us back to more sustainable growing practices. So this is the price point. And removing the black market and defunding organized crime, it's all leading us in the right direction, in my opinion. And as far as shatter and all of those other things, the market dictates what's going to happen. If people want certain products, they're going to get it.
I'm just going to say that the idea of the legislation, and like any product, as you were saying with craft beer, you can't just sell craft beer. It must be tested and approved by the Canadian Food and Inspection Agency. You can't just make a product or bathtub gin and sell it on the market. That's illegal. Same as shatter and all these other products. We have no idea what's in them. There's no testing. There's no standards. there's no other product in Canada that's sold without any standards or testing. Unfortunately, the black market is doing that, and it has proliferated. And I think a big part is consumer education. But I think what we need to do is there is a huge cannabis industry in Canada that is a black market underground economy that is strongly tied to parts of the organized crime or other criminal elements. And I think the legislation is doing the great job in making an above ground, transparent industry, which is, I think, what we've needed for a long time.
Yeah, I agree with Jeanette, but I want to reiterate that as long as there's a profit incentive, that black market is not going anywhere. They're not, and that is a concern. And I think that that's really what the government has to study the most, is that what is the price point that will de-incentivize the elements that they, I mean, we do have problems here, especially in British Columbia, with gangs, and there was actually something happened today. You know, I mean, this is I'm not hearing the right conversation coming from the government with how do you take away that profit incentive, and they're basing their costs right now on what cannabis is being sold in dispensaries. Well, that's not an accurate amount. Those are black market costs. So they need to rethink that.
Yeah, and I guess in a way you're right that there certainly is an issue when you can make a lot of money. People are going to find ways to break the system. They're going to go black market. They're going to make it stronger. They're going to make people want their product versus the legalized, maybe not as potent, not as strong product for sure. And if you reduce the price too much, do you get overconsumption? Do you get kids going to school, adults going to work now high because they could smoke it like a cigarette and nobody cares? So you've made it too affordable that every single person has it, wants it, does it, and now you spend the next 2 to 5 years managing people being high continuously because it's something new that's legal. So I guess there has to be some sort of threshold that allows for people to, yes, certainly enjoy it in recreation, but not turn it into something that is an everyday walk of life. And then we have to adjust everywhere else because 80% of the workforce is high all the time, or whatever it breaks out to be. But I guess there's a fine line on where that cost sits. One of the last questions I kind of have, and I have no idea if this is correct or not, but I remember hearing it a few times, and that was that when you smoke a lot, you tend to, that is your gateway or entry level drug into harder drugs. Is this just a myth? Is this a reality? And does it matter? Is this something that we have to look at as a culture too, that if a younger person starts off smoking marijuana at a younger age, that by the time they hit 25, they've done so much, they're bored of it, that they have to go to a harder drug. So you're kind of becoming a gateway because we haven't educated them enough on how it's a recreational use, not an everyday use, or whatever that might be. So what are your thoughts on that? And Janet?
Thank you. That's really important. And one of the biggest things in legislation, again, is to ensure that it stays out of the hands of youth. We do know from research that there is some impact on developing brains with cannabis use. The biggest thing we need is more research in the industry. But for now, I think we need to play it safe. As far as the gateway theory, though, there's never been any documentation saying that cannabis leads to stronger drugs. It might be social network. It might be a lot of things. There's been some really interesting, very small anecdotal studies and trials recently, actually, where people have been weaning from harder drugs such as opiates and utilizing cannabis as a harm reduction method, which I think is really exciting with the non-lethality of cannabis. So I look at it as a gateway the other way, a gateway away from potentially lethal drugs. So I'm happy with that.
Well, that's awesome. That's valid too. I would agree that would certainly help. I think I've heard people say they do the same thing with their smoking. To cut smoking down, they use marijuana to stop smoking too. So there's certainly lots of elements there too.
Hi everyone, sorry I have to head out now. I have to go back to the second location.
All right, no problem. Thank you, Natasha, so much.
Bye.
Bye, Natasha.
Bye. It was good talking to you all. Sorry, time zones don't help.
Okay.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Natasha.
Kelly, any final thoughts on that from yourself?
We're talking about cannabis as a potential gateway. No, I completely agree with Jeanette, and that is also going. She touched on the most important thing that I wanted to. One of the most important things that I think that we're going to see in the future, talk about disruptors, is the research. You know, the research. There has been a lot of research done on cannabis. Unfortunately, it hasn't all been done. It hasn't all been published. It hasn't been done by, you know, the big universities that people want to see research come out of. But there has been a lot of research done, and once more research and more publications, and this is going to be a real. It is a game changer, as Jeanette said earlier. This is going to be a phenomenal time for medicine, plant medicine, and natural medicine. I guess I call cannabis plant medicine. I don't call it, you know, I don't equate it with alcohol and tobacco the way other people can compare it to alcohol and tobacco. It is plant medicine, and when I use those terms, a lot of times people, you can see the look on their face just immediately changes, like, oh yeah, it's a plant and it's medicine, and that's what it is. So the research that we have to look forward to is literally going to save millions of lives. I think I'm quite sure of that.
I like that. I second that motion if I'm allowed. Call it down, but I do agree. It is a great thing, and I think it's going to. I'm not sure it'll save millions of lives, but I'm certainly think it's going to enhance and affect a lot of people. That it's going to help, and I think that that's the key to it all. Is that it's taking yourself out of that old mindset that this was illegal, this is bad, and looking at what the benefits are, and they certainly outweigh any of the negatives that anybody can possibly throw at it. So I guess in a way, everybody on this panel is pretty pros, so that's good. So I guess in the end, any final thoughts? Is there anything from a legislation standpoint or anything from a business standpoint that crosses your mind that you want to get out there before we wrap up?
Sure, I'll speak briefly. I'm really thrilled with the legislation that came out. I think it's still a work in progress, but I think it's a great first step in with the goals of creating a regulated, restricted, and controlled market, which, you know, it's not the Wild West. We need to have a controlled market. And as a licensed producer, we're expanding as fast as we can. Our shareholders are really supportive. We have a lot of them. And we're doing a lot of really exciting things this year. We've just acquired more land, and our expansion plans are well underway. So I think we're all trying to scale up to meet the needs of the future legalized market.
Kelly, any final thoughts on your end?
I guess I'm looking forward to seeing, first of all, how the conversation continues in Canada. You know, it's only been a week since the legislation came out. There's been a lot of reaction, both positive and negative. I think that it's going to reach a point of saturation, and then some reality might set in for some people, and I hope, you know, the key to survival is adaptation. That is the number one rule. So as people adapt, but I think we have to continue to be very progressive and to not make mistakes that have been made in other sectors in the past. So when we talk about craft beer, you know, one of the even though this is a great opportunity for young and vital business people to do what they love, craft beer still has a lot of challenges, and maybe cannabis will be able to circumvent that. And then in the food industry, you know, the industrialization of food, I think that cannabis can learn a lot from that. The cannabis industry can learn a lot from that, and maybe have a more local movement, if you will. I'm all in favor of the testing, or sorry, not the testing, but I believe it's important to know what you put into your body. It's important to know where it comes from. How's that? And I think that that cannabis might be a catalyst for this in not just cannabis, but in other things, right? So this is very exciting for me as a writer.
Oh, that's awesome. And I like that. I think overall, in general, I can say that from the conversation we've had today, it seems very upbeat, very positive. There's a very large new industry that's being created. The government supporting it and almost being the #1 driver behind all of this. I think that there's a lot of exciting things that are going to come in the next 6 to 8 months, or even the next 6 to 12 months. But I think that you're right. There's going to be a lot of education, a lot of dollars that are going to have to be thrown in by the government to start educating people around the board in schools, in business, on how to work with this, how to maneuver and get around it. But I think at the same time, it's going to be up to the people to educate themselves on the benefits of where this is going to go as an industry versus the fear that's been there for the last 60, 70 years, maybe forever.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, that's awesome. But I'm going to say I appreciate everything you guys have talked about today. I think that's been pretty awesome. I think we could probably talk for hours and days on this subject, and I think we will continue to have these sessions, and hopefully you guys would love to come back as we get closer to that next year date. And maybe we can have the same call again on April 20th, maybe our 4th or 5th show. So we'll do this a couple more times, but then we'll have the big powwow on the 20th of April. So the 420, we'll have this regroup and talk about how great this new program is that Canada just set up.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Have a great day.
You guys have an awesome day, and thank you again for sharing all the information.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you.
420.
Happy 420.
Happy 420, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, just to wrap up, a quick segment, but I think that was a pretty cool show. I thought very upbeat, very positive, a lot of good insights from the legislation to women moving into the business side to where the Canadian government wants to go, how the grow operations are working. So a lot of great information. I'm pretty excited about that. I look forward to our next conversation for sure that's going to come out, the 3rd show of this, and maybe the 4th or 5th, but it seems to be that Canada's moving in the right direction, that we're the leaders, we're the ones making all of this happen, and everybody's looking for us on what the next steps are going to be. So it's pretty exciting, and I think that Justin and team are starting to make a good impact, and the rest of the world's starting to watch and follow behind. So we'll keep working at it, and thank you everybody for joining in. We'll see you guys on the next show, which I believe is in a week and a half, probably some with tech stars. But anyway, have a great day, and thanks for joining us. I'm Jeffrey Potvin, and this is the Open People Network.